So welcome to everybody who's joining us on this fantastic webinar where we'll be discussing everything that you've ever wanted to know about residency visas like the Golden Visa, the D7, and the Digital Nomad Visa or the D8. We'll also be talking about Portuguese citizenship and how you get that. I know that a lot of people moving to Portugal, one of their goals is to obtain Portuguese citizenship, and some people might even have ties to Portugal already through a spouse or a grandparent or a parent, and they look to get Portuguese citizenship that way. So we thankfully have an expert to answer all these questions, because I have been getting a lot of them coming through and I definitely do not know the answer to them. And they seem very complex to me. So I'm very, very glad that we have Sandra Gomes Pinto, who's going to be talking us through all these different areas of Portuguese law. And she has a lot of experience in the area. She has worked on a number of international projects, I believe, over 30 years experience. She has extensive experience in litigation. And she works and she speaks at conferences on the subjects of litigation and international investment in Portugal and real estate in Portugal. So this is someone you want fighting your case when you are going to be going up against SF or any other area of Portuguese law. So thank you so much, Sandra, for joining us today.
And thank you so much, James, for inviting me. We are really happy, our office, to help you and to assist you. We think your project, Portugalist, is super, super interesting and very innovative, and we really like to work with you. I think we share common values of transparency and honesty, and we are really glad to be part of this. I think you are a happy mixture of someone that has was born in the United Kingdom, I believe, but has had a chance to have the flexibility of an education in Portugal. Perhaps a little bit less efficient, but perhaps more creative and more happy and more sunnier, definitely sunnier.
Absolutely. There are definitely good things that come with living in Portugal. So Sandra, I've got so many questions here from people. I don't know, do you want to just jump straight into them? Or do you want to give a little bit of background about maybe what it is that you do? Because perhaps for some people, this is their first time dealing with a lawyer and dealing with a lawyer for relocation. And you could explain, what is it that you do for your clients?
So we help our clients from A to Z. I'm a lawyer here for 30 years. In those last 7 years, I have my own project. And our objective here at the office is to make life easier and smoother and make their journey to Portugal better. And at this point, we know exactly how we can impact positively and make a better journey, a happier journey to Portugal, taking care of all the legal details, and also to address what we already know that are the little obstacles that people would face whenever coming to Portugal, and that can make their life much harder. Just sometimes picking some package from the post office, or if any major health issue arises, it's really important to you have someone you can rely on, and that would give you a sure and a knowledgeable answer. I think that is very important when you move to Portugal. At this age, I'm 53, so at this age, we think about a little bit of the impact you want to live in life. So for sure, this is a way, this is a job, this is a business, this is a way. I have a team, people have to earn a living, but we also have to make friends and to meet new people and to have a positive impact in whoever comes to us and has our assistance and our help.
So you are
from a point of view, from a practical point of view, so we help everything. We give information about the country. So I think it's very important that people know exactly what they are looking for, and tell us what they're looking for, what are the non-negotiables, what are the things that are really important to them, so we can address these issues even prior to coming to Portugal. Then, and so it's important sometimes to help people to assess which location which would make more sense for them, and which type of accommodation, which type of things, what are the activities they they don't want to miss, what are their fears. So I think this is very important to address prior to people coming to Portugal from a relocation point of view. From a legal and a practical point of view, what we can do, we can get tax numbers, bank accounts, which at this point is a troublesome issue. We can, in respect to the rental agreement, to getting a rental, in most visas it's necessary to have a proof of accommodation, and at this point many times it's safer to get a 1 year lease when you initiate the application in your country of nationality or legal residency. So people prior to coming to Portugal will need to have a tax number, a bank account, and a 1 year lease. And so we help people with these three things, which we think it's important to get and address as soon as possible. And so we help people to choose according to their criteria to find an apartment, which is rather difficult now because the rental market is very hot in the moment. And once they find the ideal apartment, we try to secure the apartment, which is difficult because sometimes we have to call in a hurry, because if we don't do that, people are already leasing to another person. So this is an issue that is delicate and can have a huge impact in the relocation process. We also we do a legal due diligence in respect of the documentation of the apartment or the house. We also check from a legal point of view the clauses of the contract. Many times at this point, landlords are asking much money to the foreigners. So we try to negotiate to bring to more reasonable amounts. And we also try to take a look at the whole contract to make sure there's nothing in the contract that can be bad for our client, can jeopardize their position in any way. We also think we to avoid conflicts and to think how if any conflicts arises, how it will be addressed, and we try to establish means to address conflicts in a positive way, in a efficient way. So this is from a lease contract perspective. Then we can also help people from with the D7. So we can explain the requirements, and prior to anyone contracting us, we make sure they comply with the requirements. If someone doesn't comply with the requirements, we don't want to be hired. So we make sure that people are ready to and fulfill the requirements at an early stage and without charging anything to our prospect clients. Then we provide them with a list and explain each and every document, even each and every requirement. We set up regular Zooms with the clients to help them prepare all the documents. And then we set up several Zooms to check, double check, triple check all the documents, all the details, the personal statement, what they should write, how they should write. We have had clients that have minor criminal things that they did, and we in the personal statement we explain and how the authorities should overcome this, because according to the Portuguese law, this should be overcome according to what is established in the law. But it's important to address these problems, and that has a huge, because we have all these clients that had minor criminal things that were not very serious. We were able to get them an approval in the application process. So we help them with all these aspects. and we prepare them so whenever they get to the consulate, they know exactly, they are sure that they have a file very well organized. They comply with each and every detail by this time, and also by the time they get afterwards, after being in the appointment, when they come to Portugal, they have everything they need. There is no surprise, no bad surprises. And then when they get the staff appointment, we already do a second process and help them with all the details and with all things to make sure there is nothing missing, and that we are able to address any abnormal difficulty that might arise.
Okay, well, that is quite a
What
comprehensive
we can
service.
do from the D7 point of view. We can also, from a tax perspective, prior to the people coming to Portugal, address their tax situation and know how coming to Portugal will impact them from a tax perspective. And that can mean that people can spare thousands of euros if they do this properly. And sometimes it's small things, just as setting a company, just applying for the non-habitual tax regime at time, just to change, to do some minor things with a proper tax lawyer. You can have a huge impact in your financial situation and also in your well-being, because you don't have this bad tax surprises. So it's important to address that prior to coming, to know what would be the impact tax-wise of relocating to Portugal, and how you can make your relocation more efficient from a tax perspective. And we study that, we have lots of practice in that, and we were able to make the situation of our clients very efficient from a tax perspective.
Okay,
yes.
that's a lot.
Yes, that's a lot. Yes. Did you want to ask anything more? There's more things that we can
There's
do.
more things. Well, keep going, because I think it's a good idea for people to know just the broad range of services that you offer.
I think it's important. It's very important to insert people in the national healthcare system. This is something you can do only when you have a resident permit card. And although our national healthcare system is not perfect, it still has lots of advantage that, for instance, an American doesn't have. In American, we have an American client that used to spend 1,000 euros in everything related to her diabetes type 1 situation. And in Portugal, at least at this time, she doesn't pay a penny, because anything related to her diabetes type 1 situation is paid by the Portuguese state. So this is, we try to insert people in the national healthcare system, which might be useful in urgencies for a family doctor and for many medication. Perhaps it's not super fancy, the premises of the public services, but it might be quite useful, and the quality of the doctors is quite good. So we try, this is something we can help our clients to. We have a person that gets them the best healthcare insurance for their specific situation. So this is something we can take care of. We also can help them acquire properties when this is the case. This is something I have been doing for 30 years. So we know exactly what the market, what is necessary to do. I will not go over the process of buying a house in Portugal, because it will take me some time, but if you want, I can do that too. But with 30 years experience, we know that something as simple as a promissory contract can raise problems that can cause litigation for 10 years. So it's important that to take proper look at the promissory contract and just not do what the realtor says you to do. And because that can prevent a lot of damages in the future, and it can have a huge impact, financial impact in your financial life here in Portugal. So I think there's lots we can help people. So with acquiring properties, we can, once a person acquires a property, it would make sense to have their marriage recognized here, to make a will, because if anything happens, it will be easier their situation. So there's many things we can do to help clients and to make, and that can have a very impressive and very significant financial impact.
Okay. I'm getting the impression it's a good idea to speak to you before I move to Portugal, which is very good news because Sandra and her team, who are working and answering questions today in the background as well, have been very kind, and they are offering, I think you said, the first 100 people a 30-minute free session with you, and just to get an idea of their needs.
Yes.
I'm going to put Sandra's email into the chat so that everybody has the contact information. And if you just use the code Portugalist, she'll be able to know where you came from and that you were taking advantage of this 30-minute call with her team.
Yes, and without any kind of compromise, and without pushing them to do anything with us.
That's fantastic. Well, there's a couple of things that you mentioned there that we'll get to in the later questions, but I think they're very important things. Basically things that affect your health greatly, or your life greatly. So if you get your tax situation wrong when you move to Portugal, that can have negative consequences if you don't sign up for the health service. If you're not able to do that properly, that can greatly affect your life. Or if you get a property, and this one I think is probably the least serious of them all, but it happens to quite a lot, as people rent a property and they haven't had the lease reviewed by anyone, and it's a lease that's in a foreign language. They don't really know what the terms of it are. That can make a big difference to your quality of life if you're tied into a property that isn't working for you, and the landlord isn't being fair.
Yes, of course. I think it can usually impact badly anyone that comes to Portugal, because at this point the landlords have had some problems with foreigners, so they are demanding lots of money in down payment, and more than they should do, and more than the law allows. So I think these issues should be addressed properly. We just had an American client recently, and she told me that the landlord told her that as she was foreigner, she could not get a lease without a grantor, which is not true. And in the end, we talked, and the landlord was very reasonable, and we could get her an apartment without a grantor. So it was quite easy. But sometimes it's just talking with the people in their own language, and in a way that they can better understand. Then probably this is something I would not do if I would go to England or the States, if I didn't know how people would react, what's the practice of the country. So I think that can be very important for the persons.
Absolutely. And one of the questions that we had, and you have answered this a little bit, was someone said, I could do all of this myself. I could find an apartment myself. I could fill out the form for the D7 myself. Why would I use a lawyer instead of trying to do it myself?
You know what, James? I think there are very organized people out there that can spend hours checking information, that they have a lot of free time to do so. And for those that are super organized, that won't want to do things on their own, they probably don't need a lawyer, they don't need a doctor, they don't need a psychologist, because they can study the internet, they can get all the information. I believe that are people that are able to do on their own. But for those who cherish good professionals, who think that want to do things the right way, the proper way, with professional assistance, and that cherish that, I think for those who want to do it professionally, it's a fantastic adventure to move to a foreign country. But still, you don't know the country, you don't know the practices, you don't know how people react, you don't know how to, you are not proficient in the language. So I think that for many people it would be better to have a lawyer. But I believe that there are people that can do things on their own. Yes, that is true. That is true all over the world.
I think so. I agree. I mean, if you get it right and it goes through it works, but the problem is when something goes wrong and then you're trying to deal with, say, for finances or something, inevitably you end up having to hire someone to try and fix the problems that you've created.
And then you lost a lot of time, you lost a lot of months where you already paid the lease, and that was and you lost a lot of time. So in the end, it's much expensive, much more expensive. We have had clients that are gathered in the expats communities, and they have been telling, we've heard horror stories, and other have told me, we hired a lawyer. Initially, it was everything very well. For some times they were responsive, but in the end, they it was much more complicated because the lawyer changed firm, and they started to being non-responsive, and then it was a mess. We have also friends that told us, we have lots of friends that had not successful applications. And this happened because people did not address the details. And sometimes we live in a country of unstandardized bureaucracy. Sometimes in the self appointment, they just take a look at 3 or 4 documents. Sometimes they take a look at everything and they want to invent something very hard to put you in the bad position. Once they asked, it was an American client, and they asked for that they really needed a social security card. This happened only once. And what we do is said, but the law gives us 10 days to present this document. So we did it. So, but we were able to overcome this problem. So, but this is important to have a lawyer. It is really important to have a lawyer to overcome these legal difficulties.
Exactly. And I am sure there are some language difficulties with some SEF offices as well.
Yes, there are offices where they don't speak proper English, so, and sometimes they are in a bad mood and they don't want to do the effort.
Yes. Well, I think it is surprisingly not just immigration in Portugal. For whatever reason, immigration in all countries, they're not the most people-friendly, and they're not the most understanding, that you sort of need to handhold people when they move to a foreign country.
Yes, we have had places, I will not mention the places where they were quite unpleasant and the atmosphere was not good. So it's good to have a professional by your side there.
Okay, perfect. And it's not just you, you have a team who I know are answering the questions. I don't know if you want to give a quick mention to them.
Yes, I have a team. The most important members of our team is Inaida Furtado and Alessandra Paciencia. These are my most important members of the team, but we have a bunch of people working in the office, and we also have experts in all the areas of law that have been helping us for almost 20 years now.
Okay. And they are answering questions in the background today in the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So if you have a question that you haven't asked me already, you can ask it there. But in the meantime, I'm going to go through the questions that have already been asked with Sandra. So let's start off with some easy ones. And what is the sort of difference between the D7, D8, and Golden Visa? We sort of know what they are, but could you explain why a person might apply for one and not the other?
So the D7 is for those who have passive income, meaning rentals, interests, dividends, royalties, income that they don't have to work for. And just until now, the D8 is very recent. It entered into force, this regime, in the end of 2022. So during the time of the pandemic, where this tendency to have remote workers all over the world, digital nomads, there are many people coming to Portugal, and the Portuguese authorities allowed that they came through the D7. Nowadays, since we have a specific route, they have to go to the digital nomad visa, which is for those who work. So they don't have passive income, they have active income, the income they get through their work. And it's important also to mention that D8 is not only for those who work digitally. The D8 can be for those people working manually or for artists. The D8 is appropriate for anyone that is working remotely in Portugal, but being paid by a foreign entity, irrespective of the nature of the professional relationship they have with this entity. They can be independent contractors, they can have labor work, they can have whatever professional relationship with a foreign entity. And this is the D8, the digital nomad visa. And these are the two main visas. So people asked a lot if with an active income they could come under the D7, and my answer is no, it's not possible. And these two visas, as all the other visas in Portugal, with the exception of golden visa, are residency visas. So they require you to have your home in Portugal. They require you to reside in Portugal. And there is minimum mandatory time, significant time to stay in Portugal with these two visas, the D7, the D8, and even with the D2. And then we have the golden visa. With these two visas, the D7, the D8, you are not required to invest anything, and the financial requirements are relatively low. For the D7, you have to show that on average you earn a Portuguese minimum salary, which is 760 euros per month. With the D8, you have to prove that on average, and the 3 months is prior to initiating the application, you earn 4 Portuguese minimum salaries, which at this point are 3,040 euros per month. So these are the financial requirements, but they don't require you to invest. The golden visa, with the golden visa, you don't have times you only need to stay in Portugal 7 days per year, but it requires you to invest in Portugal. So the golden visa would be a good option for those who are not in the position to relocate to Portugal because they have professional obligations that do not allow them to do so. And it's also important for those who can do so but want to have a second option in Europe, in a safe country. It's sort of a preventive immigration that people are doing, lots of nationalities. But those who cannot live or do not want to live in Portugal can use this golden visa that, on the flip side, requires an investment but gives you a lot of freedom. So D7, D8. D7 is for those who have passive income. D8 is for those who have active income generated by any type of work. These two require you to live in Portugal, but don't require you to invest here. The golden visa is for those who want to have a second option in Europe, but it requires it so that you don't have to move to Portugal, but it requires, on the flip side, to invest in Portugal, which is not necessary in the two previous situations. Was I clear enough, James?
You were absolutely clear, but I noticed you were talking about the golden visa in the present, and there's a couple of questions from people coming in about the golden visa ending, which is something that's been in the news for the last few months, but I know there have been a number of updates ever since it was first announced. So could you give us the very, very, very latest update?
Has been a roller coaster about projects and news about the golden visa. So I will talk first about what is clear. The Portuguese, it was already approved in the parliament, the new law that didn't enter yet into force. So now everything is as it was before. But in respect to the new law, what is clear? The golden visa is here to stay. There is no doubts about that. All those that already invested have to follow absolutely the old regime. So they only have to be 7 days in Portugal, and the renewals and family reunification are totally safe. For those who want to invest in Portugal and want to do a golden visa, it is possible. The minimum stay requirements will be still the 7 days, and the renewals will follow the regime that always was applicable in Portugal. So the golden visa is here to stay, no doubts about that. The only thing new is that real estate investment or real estate related funds, anything related to real estate will be out of the table. This is the only novelty. But even before, there were lots of people that wanted to invest in funds because it was easier. They didn't have to pay the taxes of real estate acquisition, and they did prefer to get a good fund and to invest in funds. So at this point, and with the new law, it is possible to invest in the golden visa with funds, investing in the company alongside with the creation of jobs. It's important to invest in scientific research, which I think could be very useful and very interesting if people can do it properly. And it's also it's possible to invest in cultural and artistic projects, which I think might be also very interesting. So at this time, as a final note, the golden visa is alive, totally alive, except for the real estate that will in some days or in some months no longer be available. It is possible to invest in funds, in scientific research, in cultural projects for golden visa purposes, which for many people would be something interesting and something that they would be eager to do because they would be contributing to the development of the country. So I think these were I don't want you to, I don't know if you want me to enter into details, but I will. So at this point, the president just did a political veto of the new law. So at this moment in time, it is still possible to invest in real estate. Probably it will be the last opportunity to invest in real estate for golden visa purposes. But of course, in every deal, I think people will have to make a risk assessment, and we will have to be if it's safe, and the contracts will have to address this risk appropriately.
Perfect. Okay, well, that is a really helpful update because I know it's been a confusing topic for everybody who's just been getting bits and pieces of information everywhere. So I think the summary of that is there's a short little period of time where the real estate option might still be an option, but you have to assess whether the risk of trying to get something in that time. But otherwise, all the other options in the golden visa are staying, and that's still going to be a route to residency or having roots in Portugal.
Yes, because yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump onto the D7 because I know we had the most questions about that particular visa. I think because it's more attainable for a lot of people. I'm going to start you off with the question that seems to be the biggest pain problem for everybody, which is this 1-year lease that you need to get in advance for it. Is so the first question is a two-part question. Is one, do you really need this? And two, how do you get this when you don't live in Portugal?
So you can hire someone to do that work for you. Some places, I think Portugal is still the country of unstandardized bureaucracy. And the Portuguese law only talks as a requirement for the visa of proof of accommodation. But there are discretionary powers of all those that will have to assess whether you have proof of accommodation or not. I think that if you want to be on a safe side, and if you want to make sure as you will have a successful application, it's better to have a 1-year lease. In some cases, they accept 6 months. In some cases, when, for instance, in certain types of visa of high value activities, they might even accept a letter that allows you to live in someone's home. But this is not the norm. and I want to make sure in respect to our clients that they have successful applications. So I would go for the 1-year lease, although not everybody asks for that.
So, and it's 1 year lease, or someone could, if they already own a property or are buying a property in Portugal, would
Yes,
that count as well?
that would be a plus. Also, the requirement of the law is proof of accommodation. So if you have a house in Portugal, or if you are going to buy a house in Portugal, and you can prove that you own a house in Portugal, you'll have automatically a proof of accommodation that is even better than a lease itself.
Okay, because that shows that you're very committed to moving to Portugal.
And you have proof of accommodation. You have a proof of a place to stay in the country, which in the end, this is the requirement.
Okay. So that is the biggest challenge that people had. And you mentioned earlier on that there were some complications about getting bank accounts at the moment. Could you, or opening Portuguese bank accounts, could you explain that a little more?
I think that all over the world, and also with this war, I think there is an anti-corrupt act, and people want to avoid that Russian money, or they want to make sure where the money comes from. So it is necessary, anti-money laundering act. So it's really necessary. The compliance departments of the banks want to know where did your money come from, and so this will be something really important to access prior. And the compliance departments are being quite demanding. They do ask for lots of papers, and sometimes they take quite some time to evaluate the situation of the clients. So I think this is something that could be done in an early stage, as early as possible. So people then they want to move with a lease or buying a house, and then they don't have the bank account, or just they want to move forward with the application. So I think this is the kind of stuff that could be assessed on an early stage.
Okay, so this, if you're thinking about moving to Portugal next year sometime, maybe this is something that you should start doing right now.
Yes, I think it would be to get a tax number, to get a bank account. If you are sure about you want to move forward with this is something you should do at an early stage.
Okay. Now, the next question that came up quite a lot, both in terms of the D7 and D8, was people wanted to know about the minimum physical stay requirements once they were resident in Portugal. Can you explain how that works, and is it the same across all visas?
Mm-hmm. It is like this. You should not leave the country according to the law for more than 6 months in a row or 8 months total. And this will be assessed only by the time of the renewal. Until now, the authorities have not been very strict on that regard. So they will check whether Portugal was your home, whether you were tax resident here, and they will make sure of that. But if you stay a little longer out of the country, because of professional or family reasons, that until now has been accepted by the authorities. This is, I repeat, this is something that will only be checked by the time of a renewal, so within a 2-year period time.
Okay. So one other question that came up quite a lot from people was to do with taxes in Portugal, because people at the moment often have the general question was, if I move to Portugal on the D7, will I be subject to taxes there? Because a lot of people have situations where they might have remote works in another country and they're doing the work for, say, an American company or a British company, but they're living in Portugal. Is there a definitive answer of where people would be paying tax?
First of all, there's something that's important to say. We have conventions to avoid double taxations with almost all the countries, with the United Kingdom, with America. So people will never be double taxed. I think there is not a straightforward. That would depend. We would have assess it individually, but this is something that people should pay attention to and should hire a professional before coming to Portugal. Because until now, there are people working remotely and not paying taxes here, and the Portuguese tax authorities have not been very attentive. but I believe that sooner or later, and perhaps sooner than later, that will change. So I think these things would have to be assessed in due time, and it's important and possible to sometimes to get situation not very complicated to make their relocation much more efficient from a tax perspective. So this is something that is really important to address at an early stage. But there is, for most questions in respect to taxes, and unfortunately it's all over the world like this, many times there is not a straightforward answer. And that's not only taxes, but also for social security and for the problems that might arise also for employers. So this is something that people should take care of.
Okay. And you alluded there to some possible changes that haven't been announced, but you sort of feel like there's a bit of a change in the air with regards to how, say, the tax office is looking at people.
Remote workers, yes.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be any changes to visas like the D7?
I think so too, because we noticed that with the golden visa, that the European Union did a pressure in Portugal and in many countries to avoid to end up with the golden visa. So I believe that the financial requirements of the D7 are quite low, and I believe that that will sooner or later and perhaps sooner than later will change. So I think if people do want to go for the D7, I think now it's the time to do it.
Okay. And you had mentioned to me off camera when we spoke about this before that you feel like the citizenship, which is another thing that people are very interested in, that there might be more requirements to show proof of certain things in Portugal. Could you say what those were?
I think one of the requirements is that you have to prove an effective connection with the Portuguese community. And I think the Portuguese authorities, again, here have discretionary powers to analyze that. And I believe that will be more complicated in the future because, as you probably know, Portugal, in terms of citizenship and in comparison to the United Kingdom, has much lower requirements. And since there are so many people applying, and once they have Portuguese citizenship, they will have the civil and political rights of an European citizen with the possibility to travel without a visa within 198 countries, plus the right to work, live, or study in any European country. This is a big thing. So I believe that also the European Union will restrict that for Portugal, and perhaps the law will change, or the authorities will just be more demanding in respect to the requirements.
Okay, so the takeaway I think is once you get your residency in Portugal, from straight away you should be looking to make ties with the Portuguese community. So when you put that application in, you can show that you've made an effort.
This is something we advise our clients to do. Sometimes be part of the soccer game, be part of some community associations, give back in some supporting, start to learn the language from day one. But not everybody takes care of that in a preventive way and starts to prepare in due time to make sure that they do meet the requirements by the time of the application for citizenship.
Okay, I do notice that people, they come in with a lot of enthusiasm in the beginning, and then there's a lot to do in the beginning, and they think I'm gonna make friends with Portuguese people, I'm gonna learn the language, and then they sort of lose the motivation a little bit after a few months once they start to get settled.
Yes, I think it's good to get a good teacher because the Portuguese will speak in English, and it's always when you start to learn a language, it's always easier to communicate when people address in your mother language.
Absolutely. So there's quite a few questions about the sort of insurance that's needed for the D7. And there's sort of two questions here because people have the initial application for the visa and then they have the CEF appointment once they come to Portugal. And are the two types of insurance that they need different? And can you explain a little bit what they are?
Yes, at the beginning, prior to coming to Portugal, you will need a travel insurance, which should include always repatriation expenses. By the time you go to the CEF appointment, you are in the second stage, so you should just show health insurance. That doesn't have to include repatriation expenses, but should have a coverage of 30,000 euros. Normally, this is what is established by the authorities as acceptable.
And if so, how long does someone need to keep that insurance before, let's suppose they were able to get registered for the public health service after a few months?
I think you should I think it's always good to have, if you can, to have a private health insurance on top of to be inserted in the national healthcare system. So if it's a good insurance, I think you should do it for 1 year, because you would have the insurance, and if any health problem arises, you don't have to wait for the initial time, for the grace period of the insurance. So I think you should do it a 1 year insurance, 1 year, for a 1 year period, if it's a good insurance, because you will
Okay.
need insurance on top of being certain in the national healthcare system.
And maybe just for those who aren't coming from Europe, you could just give a very, very brief overview of how the sort of Portuguese health system works, because it's got two sort of systems, the private and the public, and what do they look like?
So we have a national healthcare system that's universal. As you know, as in, I think it's all over Europe, a little bit like this. The states have been not investing much in the national healthcare system. So it's probably a system that's not enough for you to provide and to take care of all your health issues then, and the possible issues that may arise in the future. So we have an universal healthcare system that it's good for urgency, it's good for have family doctors. It's important because they still can participate in lots of medicines. So it's important. On top of that, I will also add a private health insurance, because the national healthcare system at this point does not satisfy all the needs of a person in due time, in an efficient manner.
I
But the
think
quality of the doctors is very good in Portugal. So Portugal in worldwide in the list of developed countries ranks 12th in terms of healthcare, whereas the states that has so many research centers and big universities ranks 20th. So I think for not a very wealthy country, it's quite good that we rank 12th in the world healthcare system.
yes, I think it's a problem, unfortunately, all over Europe, that the
Yes.
public health systems, which were a fantastic idea and had a lot of infrastructure and support put into them for a long time, the governments have not been putting the money into that. So people all over Europe are experiencing this and thinking about taking on private insurance just as an extra, so that they can do the easy things quickly, and then for the big things they fall back on the public health system.
And I think there's a lot to do in terms of public management of the health units. Yes.
So we've got a couple of questions about applying, where you apply for something like the D7 or D8. So some people are wondering, could they do it in Portugal, or do they do it where they live?
In D7, you have to do in your country of nationality of legal residency. D7. It's not
Okay.
possible to start a D7 in Portugal. In the terms of D8, you can do in your country of legal residency or nationality, and there is a mechanism in Portugal, the manifestation of interest, but that doesn't work that good. So normally you would advise clients, if they can, to start in their country of nationality or a legal residency.
And suppose I had moved from somewhere like the US to Spain, and then I decided, actually, I want to move to Portugal. Would I apply in Spain or in the US?
If you are a legal resident in Spain, you can
Hmm.
apply in Spain.
Okay.
You can apply in Spain. You can choose to apply in Spain or in the US. If
Okay.
you are not yet a legal resident in Spain, you should apply in the US.
Okay. Now,
Or D7.
mhm, for the D7. Okay. And just keeping with the D7, you'd mentioned before that the income requirement is 760 euros per month.
Yes.
We know that the cost of living is increasing in Portugal. If someone comes in with just 760, are they going to be less likely to be accepted? Like, are the government really looking for more?
It depends. I think the authorities have discretionary powers because there is nothing written in the law about the exact amount. So the authorities do have discretionary powers. So the more you can show, the better. But I think it's totally possible to, if someone shows the 760 euros plus 50% for the spouse plus for 30% for his child, I think it's totally possible that a person is accepted. But I cannot say for sure because there are discretionary powers and the law is not specific in that regard. Plus to that, normally the authorities also ask for that people have in a Portuguese bank account a 1 year minimum salary savings, which is something 9,000 euros more or less. So
Okay.
is that people should prove that they earn 760 euros in respect of passive income monthly and show
Hmm.
that they have savings in respect to 1 year minimum salary in Portugal.
Okay. Um, and that is, I guess, a safety net in case, for whatever reason, your passive income dries up. You've got that 1 year of savings.
Yes, yes, of course.
So there's a few questions about the D7 and working remotely or starting a business on it. I guess some people, they might already have a pension or something coming through, but they're thinking maybe we'll do something else when we're in Portugal. Is this
I
possible?
think with any visas in Portugal, you have the freedom to work, to
Hmm.
buy a company, to own property without restriction. You will be treated almost like a Portuguese in terms of civil, economic rights and political rights, except for something very specific. So you will be entitled to do whatever you want in Portugal from that perspective, with any type of visas.
And would you say that if someone qualified for, let's say they were able to qualify for the D7, but they were also able to qualify for the D8, is there sort of an approval rate that you notice between the two?
I think the D7, since there was so much experience with it, is always more straightforward.
Okay, perfect.
Also, we know exactly, or we know with more detail, or how the authorities will analyze and assess each requirement.
And in terms of showing that you have this amount of income per month, firstly, what do you need to show? Do you show your bank statements or something like that? And secondly, is it good to show more if if you have wealth in things that
I
aren't
think the
required?
more you show, the better, because
Okay.
people will know for sure that you will not be a burden for the Portuguese state. So it's proof that you are financially well, and the more
Hmm.
you can show, the better.
Okay. Now, jumping back to that 1 year rental contract, the obviously you need this if you don't have another form of address in Portugal. Once you get residency and you've done your self-appointment, are you required to maintain this? Could you stay in Airbnbs or be more flexible?
After having the self-appointment,
Hmm.
this will only be checked by the time of the renewal. And
Okay.
by the time of the renewal, you can have a new home, a different place. So If you want to change after the staff appointment, I do not see a problem with it. This will only be checked by the time of the renewal, and you can have a different place.
Okay. And when we show all the documents for things like the income, the passive income, do these need to be translated into Portuguese, or can they be in English?
I would differentiate the first stage in the consulate, embassy, or in a VSF agency, and I would say no. In a
Okay.
second stage, by the self appointment, definitely yes. It will have to be translated, and will have to be the translation should be duly certified if you want to be on the safe side. Perhaps there will be a person that would allow a person to have a successful application without the translation, but I would not risk on that part.
Okay. So definitely important to get it right there. And I think you mentioned earlier that in the SEF offices, people will sometimes want to speak in Portuguese and not English. And that's why
Yes, that has
it's
happened to us, and we've experienced persons that didn't had no proficiency in English whatsoever. Normally older persons, but this has happened to us. So
okay.
we are there to translate and to help people.
I think that's great for people to know that they're gonna, if they work with you, they're gonna have someone who's going to be physically there with
Yes,
them and
with
to
them.
get them through that interview.
Yes, and with the experience to solve any problem if anything arises. And until now, we were able to solve everything that has happened in those appointments.
And just in terms of your sort of success rate of getting applications for things like the D7 in, can I ask what it is?
Until now, we have had 100% successful applications.
Okay.
It's not a miracle. It's checking, double checking, triple checking, and trying to address any problem in a preventive way. This is what we have been doing.
Okay, I think yes, that is very impressive. I know you say it's not a miracle, but that is very, very impressive. And so I think it's a good time
Because we don't facilitate, we don't let people hire us if we think they don't meet the requirements,
okay.
and we also are cautious and on the safe side in respect to every and each requirement.
So if for anybody who wants that kind of support with their D7 or pretty much anything else regarding moving to Portugal in terms of other visas or like the D8 or the Golden Visa or rental leases or anything else, you are offering the first 100 people who email the address that I put in the chat a 30-minute call. I'll just put the address in again, and if people just email that and mention the word Portugalist, we'll know that they're in that group of people getting that call. So I think it's definitely a wise idea to take advantage of that and get to know your team a little bit more and get those questions answered.
Yes, and it's a way to give back and to explain and to make for people easier to come to Portugal.
So there's very few questions about the D8, but one thing that did come up that I've noticed come up a little bit is you might have one person in a couple who is still working and one person's retired. So one person's eligible for the D7, one person might qualify for the D8. Should they do separate applications or should they try and do one together? And which of the two visas should they apply for?
We will have to assess that individually, taking into account the situation, the objectives, and the perspective of the couple. Sometimes it could make sense to have two separate visas,
Okay.
or sometimes it could make sense for one person. And if the people have the financial means to do so, to do one visa and another person will do a family reunification. But sometimes it could make sense to have two separate visas. So they will be completely independent from that perspective.
And that's where you're speaking to you and getting your expertise will be particularly helpful, I think. Another question about relationships is sometimes you get a couple and they're in a long-term relationship, sometimes for many, many years, but they don't live together. even though the relationship is completely legitimate, they have a long distance relationship. Are they going to run into difficulties not being able to show this?
The thing is, according to the law, this relationship, these non-marital long-term relationships, should be considered treated equally to a marriage if it's more than to that certain time. But from a practical point of view, it's more complicated. So many times, if the couples can apply for two separate visas, this is something we advise, because although in the law they are entitled, non-married couples are entitled for family reunification procedure, from a practical point of view, we know it's more complicated. So I
Okay.
experience, if the persons are in the conditions to apply for two separate visas, I would advise them to do so.
Is there a point at which you become a sort of a long-term couple in which you're not a sort of serious couple in with regards to the law?
Yes, 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Is the main time.
So let's have a look. There's some other questions I know about citizenship, and I'm wondering, do you still have time to answer a few of these, Sandra?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Perfect. So one question there, which I wonder if your services can help with this, is there are some people who move to Portugal, they get their residency, and then they're waiting to try and get a CEF appointment, but it's taking a long time. Can you give any advice, explain what happens here, and then give advice on what people should do in that situation?
I think they can try to call all the numbers they can possibly get from CEF, and sometimes after many attempts, persons get lucky. This is what we do in the office, and sometimes we have to really, it's, we understand the meaning of resilience and persistency, and so, but it's hundreds of calls sometimes, and finally you get it. Sometimes we try to find lots of emails from CEF, because there's lots of different emails, and pray a little bit to get more than an automatic answer. So I think this is what a person can try to do, is to explain specifically their situation and their pains, and with detail and with proof, and try that someone's addresses that. If that is not successful, it's possible to ask from a more legal and prejudicial attitude. It's possible to ask for an information for the public authority. The public authority is obliged to give that information within 10 work days. And if they don't, you have the possibility to do a process in the administrative court to ask for an information, or to ask them to comply with the person's rights. So it's possible to go to a court to solve these matters, but it might not be cost effective, or you have to assess whether it's worth or not.
Okay, so it sounds like prayer and persistence were the first steps, and then there are some legal options.
And then there are some legal options, yes, but there are always options. But
Okay.
we have been successful sometimes with persistence, but it's very hard.
And
hard work. Yes.
if someone is hasn't used your services yet, but they want you to handle that side of things, is that something that you can help with?
Yes, this is something we can help with, but we cannot promise miracles. We'll be honest and transparent. It's at this point, it's always hard to work with a CEF, and on our part, it requires lots of effort.
Okay. Now, jumping forward to citizenship questions. So I know most people will want to apply once they have had 5 years residency in Portugal. Once they put that application in and it goes off, how long roughly do you see citizenship applications taking?
So as an average time, we would have something like 1 year.
Mhm.
Now, after the pandemic, we had cases that are taking a little bit longer. We've had cases in the past that took much less time. I think is as always, this is a country of unstandardized procedures, so we never know for sure. But I think people should take into account 1 year, but bear in mind that it could take more time. And I being totally transparent and honest, I know lots of people are talking about 6 months, but I would say that is not true. Would be not accurate as an average amount of time to obtain citizenship.
Okay. Um, so next question then, and this is more someone who is maybe who hasn't lived in Portugal. They have taken a DNA test like you can do with 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and they are 15% Portuguese, let's say. Does that entitle them to Portuguese citizenship?
First, you have to access in terms of DNA what is 50% Portuguese, and we would have
Well,
a big subjective discussion. But I think this is not a criteria that we have in our law. So you have to have Portuguese parents, and then it will be really easy. Or you have Portuguese grandparents, and then you have also to see if you speak Portuguese or if you have strong ties to the Portuguese community. Other than that, there are not other DNA. It's not a requirement of the Portuguese law, so you just cannot use that. That's not enough proof or enough requirement to apply for Portuguese citizenship.
Okay. And suppose someone has a tie to Portuguese citizenship through a parent or grandparent. Is that something they would apply for in the country they're resident, or could they do that in Portugal?
They can do that in both places.
Okay.
Can do that also in Portugal if they hire a lawyer from their home country.
Okay. And then a question, so a person, and I've seen this one come up a few times, they gave up their Portuguese citizenship in order to get citizenship of another country like the US. Is it easy to get it back if they now want Portuguese citizenship again?
The easy would not be the expression I would use.
Okay.
But if you cherish your Portuguese citizenship, just don't give up on that. I think there is a specific route to that might be a little bit less troublesome and has less documents than the normal route. So it might be easier, but also with the Portuguese public services and with lots of applications, for sure it will still take some time. It will be easier, but still troublesome.
And so can we've mentioned that citizenship can be passed down to children. If someone becomes a Portuguese citizenship through living there, through naturalization, does that also get passed down, or is there a distinction on which ones get passed down?
No, it can be passed down to children. Yes.
Okay.
And if the children were born here
Mm-hmm.
and the person is a legal resident, they can automatically acquire Portuguese citizenship. And also, if people are not, when the child is born in Portugal, if a person is not legal resident but was born here, even though it's not Portuguese, a child can also get Portuguese citizenship. And it's also possible the other way around. Through a Portuguese child, you can have an easier path to Portuguese citizenship if you have a child that is Portuguese.
Oh, okay.
So this is a little bit complicated, but we can clear all the doubts if anyone has a problem and contacts us.
And I just see a question there about that we haven't mentioned the NHR tax regime and whether that still exists. So I thought you could just quickly mention what that is and whether it still exists.
Okay, so the NHR was something that entered into force in 2011. and the Portuguese created tax benefits to incentivize pensionists. So you say the main benefit is like this. Most conventions to avoid double taxation establish that a person would pay taxes in respect to their pension in the country of legal residency. And Portugal said that with the NHR regime, that people would be totally exempted of paying taxes in respect to their pension. On a later stage, the Portuguese authorities established that a pensionist that has to pay a 10% of taxes in Portugal if they move to Portugal in respect to their pension, but only if they are not paying these amounts, this percentage in the country of origin. And this is quite beneficial because, as you know, most countries, when the pension is significant, people do pay more than 10%. So at this time, it can be extremely beneficial for pensionists, the NH. It also has a very interesting benefit with the NHR. Automatically in Portugal, you don't pay any tax in respect to foreign passive income, such as dividends, royalties, general cases, dividends, royalties, rentals that you obtain in your country of origin or in your country of previous residency. So they will be automatically exempted and with the NHR regime, and this is extremely beneficial. And with some type of activities, that are high beneficial activities. We just had today someone that would be a director of services of a school. With some kind of activities, people will only be charged in Portugal with a 20% flat tax rate in respect to the income they will have generated in Portugal. But that it can be extremely beneficial, especially for those who have high income, because in Portugal, as you know, the tax rates can go easily up to 48%. So people with some high value activities can benefit from a 20% flat tax rate during a 10 period time with the NHR system. So doing a brief recap, first, for those who are retired and move to Portugal, they would only pay 10% in Portugal in respect to their pension, but only if not they are not paying this 10% in the country that pays this pension. Their foreign passive income, the rentals, the royalties, the interest they have in their home country with this regime will be automatically exempted. And for some professions, a person can have a 20% flat tax rate in respect to income generated in Portugal. And this is for a 10-year period. And this is the NHR, the non-habitual tax regime. But it's the non-habitual tax regime. It's important to stay. It's for those who are tax residents in Portugal. So first, you have to be civil resident. You have to have a resident permit card through any visas, golden visa, D7, D8. Afterwards, you have to become tax resident in Portugal, and only after that you can apply for the non-habitual tax regime, which is a regime of tax benefits, but this is quite important. It's important. There are some misconceptions and confusions about the NHR. One thing it's visa that has to do with immigration law. Another thing is NHR, which are tax benefits related to tax law. Although these are interconnected, without a visa, you cannot apply for the NHR. It's also important to take into account that a Portuguese can apply for the NHR. The requirement is that you were not registered in Portugal in the 5 years prior to applying for the NHR. it's also important to know that even with the NHR, you may have to pay taxes in Portugal and you may have to present tax returns in Portugal. These were, I think, the most important things I think would be important to mention about the NHR. Do you have any additional question, James?
I do. It's not quite about the NHR, but I was wondering if Portugal had a wealth tax, because I know some other European countries do.
No, we don't have wealth tax in Portugal.
Okay.
We don't have also inheritance tax for direct heirs and spouses, which is quite interesting in comparison to many other countries. And our tax when you possess a real estate property are generally quite low. The city council that you have to pay normally is less than 1%, and in many cases is based on the tax value of the property and not the transactional value of the property, which normally is much higher than the tax value of the property. So we paid we don't pay much. I have an apartment that's worth now something like 500,000 euros, and I pay less than 500 euros into installments in respect to real estate tax yearly. This is the only money I pay for the city council, which is very low if you compare it with any other European or civilized country.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that sounds very, very low. There's quite a few people asking about social security income from the US. And is that basically the same as a pension, or is it treated differently?
No, it's basically the same as a pension.
So the 10% rule
Yeah.
would apply unless it's being taxed somewhere
Yeah.
else.
But there is also the specificities of the state, because
Okay.
there people are taxed not based on residency but on citizenship. So many Americans, although they live in Portugal, they still have to pay taxes in respect to Social Security in the US.
Okay.
And in that sense, the NHR is beneficial too, because they would only have to pay in Portugal 10% if they are not already paying this amount in the US. And they also can benefit on top of that with the automatic exemption in respect to foreign passive income. So if they have rentals, interest, royalties in the States, they will automatically not be taxed in Portugal. But in any case, also with Portugal and with the US and also with United Kingdom, there is a conventions in place to avoid double taxation. So there are always mechanisms that you can benefit from.
Okay. So it sounds like definitely it's a good idea to speak to a professional to work out where is the better place to be taxed and to make sure that you are not taxed twice.
Yes. And to make sure what would be the mechanisms to avoid double taxation.
Okay.
And to use the most efficient mechanisms. And the NHR is one of them.
Perfect. Well, I think we have covered quite a lot here today, Sandra. So thank you very much for that. I know there is a lot of other questions coming through the chat, and I'm sure your team will be able to follow up with those afterwards. They have answered 135 questions so far while you've been answering all the other ones. So probably at least 175 questions have been answered today.
So this is impressive. Again,
yes,
this is having a super team also helps.
Yes, I think so. You are very impressive, I must say, because I see whenever people send an inquiry that comes through Portugal, is they get a response from you very, very quickly. You immediately reply, ask them when's convenient to set up an appointment, and it is all very, very efficient. And how it works, I know with some other companies, some people have just struggle to actually get an answer, and they're surprised because they think, I want to give this other company my money, but I can't even get a response from them. Yes,
now this is also good for my team, but because I'm always on top of things and asking them to answer and then checking them whether the emails were answered, and even on weekends, as you know, and on vacations. So I think I have to also pay a tribute to them, to Eneida, that's a force of nature that works with me, and also to Alexander, that's always with a smile and a nice tone, is willing to help people and to work on weekends and to work as much. I had to struggle with her, for her not to interrupt her holidays. I had to be tough with them. So I definitely have to pay a big tribute to them, because it's only possible because they work very hard and are very good.
Okay, fantastic. Well, they have done a fantastic job today. So many questions have been answered, and I know there's people putting more in. So I'm going to pass those questions over to you that you can deal with after this, Sandra, at this point, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to work with you, and we find your project very interesting, and we also really appreciate to work with you, James.
Well, thank you. It's been great. We've covered a lot, and it's been great that you've been able to give out so much information that I'm sure will be a help to people moving to Portugal. Because I know everybody has lots and lots of questions, and some of them really weren't easy. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having me. Have a nice day, and if anything you want to know, just come back to us.
Okay,
Okay?
fantastic.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Bye.
Bye.